Now, this week would have marked the 100th birthday of Tony Benn. In my opinion, the greatest politician of the modern era, a man of integrity, a man of honour, a man who stood up for the downtrodden, stood up for the oppressed, stood up for people who had no voice, stood up for the average man on the street, stood up for people on the other side of the world. Now, of course, this week, many people have been talking about him, sharing stories, people who know more about politics than me, people who are more articulate than me. But what I want to share with you today is a personal story. Of course, there are very memorable speeches that he gave in Parliament about the Iraq War. That very memorable speech when he said, "Don't Iraqi women weep when their children are bombed?" And the very memorable piece he did on the BBC when he was adamant that he give the address, the PO box address for the charity that was collecting donations to help the children of Gaza. For these things, to many people around the world, he's a hero. But the story I want to share with you today is more personal. In the early 80s, my father was a journalist, and he spent many long hours interviewing people like Michael Foot and Tony Benn and being inspired by them. Tony Benn was his favourite politician, and I inherited that love of Tony Benn from my dad. And this story that I'm about to share with you also shows that in the midst of tragedy and sadness, something beautiful and spiritually uplifting can happen. So the story goes like this. In December 2019, unfortunately, my father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, incurable cancer of the kidney or renal cancer. And he was in a specialist ward in Charing Cross Hospital in Hammersmith in London. And if you remember that time well, you'll remember that Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister, called a snap election. And of course, my dad wanted to vote in the election, as usual, but he couldn't because he was stuck in a hospital bed. So he wanted me to vote for him by proxy. So I downloaded the form off the government website. You have to fill out the form. I filled out the form. After you fill out the form to vote by proxy, you need the matron of the ward at the hospital to sign the form. The matron of the ward has to sign the form to confirm that the person who is sick is unable to vote in person, and therefore this is proof that they can have somebody else go and vote for them by proxy. So I filled out the form. I was in Charing Cross Hospital in the kidney cancer ward, and I went to the matron of the ward and I asked her, "Could you sign this form confirming that I can vote for my father by proxy in the general election?" And the matron, of course, agreed. And then she said to me, just out of interest, she said, "I know it's not cricket. I know it's not the British thing to do to ask people about their politics. But," she said to me, "do you mind if I ask who your father is going to vote for?" I said to her, "Sure, I don't mind telling you. He's going to vote Labour. He's always voted Labour." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because his favourite politician of all time is Tony Benn." And the matron of the ward looked at me and smiled, and she said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" She said, "I am mentioned by name in Tony Benn's memoirs with a personal acknowledgement and thank you." And I said to her, "What? How?" And it turns out, as she explained to me, that unfortunately Tony Benn's wife had passed away from renal cancer as well, from kidney cancer. And she said to me, she explained to me, Tony Benn's wife unfortunately died of the same cancer that your father has got. And she was in this very same ward. And Tony Benn was so moved and so full of gratitude for the care and the good care and the good attention that we showed his wife, that when he wrote his next book, his next set of memoirs, he mentioned me by name. He mentioned the matron of the ward by name. So what are the chances? What are the chances that the matron of that ward is mentioned by name in Tony Benn's book, and Tony Benn is my father's favourite politician? And we were right there trying to get her to sign the form so that we could vote by proxy in the election. Absolutely unbelievable story. And of course, as soon as she told me that, I took the form, went straight down the corridor to my father's ward, into his bed, and said, "You'll never believe this, Dad. The matron of the ward who signed the proxy form, it turns out that she's mentioned by name in Tony Benn's book, in his memoir." And I explained to him what she'd said to me. And of course, my dad was so happy. And he said, "You know, can you call her over?" And I brought her over. And her and my dad had this chat about their mutual love for Tony Benn. Yeah. So that's the story. Tony Benn, an incredible man who inspired people en masse, but also inspired people on a personal level. And that's my little story about me and my dad and Tony Benn. See you on the next one.